Good evening, rock and roll fans, and welcome to a very special, candid conversation between two legends in the rock and roll game. And of course, I'm talking about me, Blag the Ripper, representing the Dwarves, and Dexter Holland, representing the Offspring. We got together, he got drunk, I got wasted, and we talked about silly things. And now you are going to get to listen to the fruits of that conversation. And we did it all for PunkRockTheory.com. So listen up, enjoy yourself, do your thing, and don't forget, you got to get that brand new Dwarves record. The Dwarves invented rock and roll. Do this. Speaking of sex, drugs, and death, Dexter Holland in the place to be.
Here, I guess I'm interviewing you today, which is sort of it's really a farce, right? It's just
To me, it's that the Offspring has clearly been biting on the Dwarves this whole time. And I think what the audience wants to know is why, Dexter. Like, what is it about me that you had to copy lock, stock, and barrel?
It's time to clear the air, right? Now, I remember reading about you guys way back when, like in the Maximum Rock and Roll magazines, and your shows always only lasted 15 minutes, and it always ended in destruction, and I was like, whoa, that sounds kind of gnarly. Like, it was almost like this is a little
Spoken
bit
like a California guy.
Gnarly, yeah. It was rad and gnarly. No, but it's sort of like when I was in high school. Like, I really wanted to go see TSOL, but I was a little bit scared because I heard it was pretty frightening there. You know,
right.
Like people might get beat up.
Right.
And the one
especially
show,
if you have to actually listen to a TSOL song. That's difficult.
Hey, wait a minute, I looked at that. But the really scary one is Fear. Don't ever go to a Fear show.
Right.
You're just going to get beat up. So I would never go to that. So you guys were a little bit like that, except I was now like 21, so I would go, but it was still a little bit intimidating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I look at a show like this that we're at today at the Shoreline Amphitheater, and there's 8,000 people here, and I can't help but have mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, I feel like, fuck, finally people recognize, you know, Offspring is great, Vandals are great, these are great bands, like, people should be watching us, 8,000 people should be watching it, and then at the same time I feel like, God, it's not our thing, you know, it's like their thing, you know, and it makes me feel like it's not exclusive for us, you know.
I remember like when Nirvana broke, it was all that same thing. Oh, it's so lame, people like them now, and I always thought that was kind of weird to feel like, oh, it has to be mine and no one else can like it or whatever. Mm-hmm. Once your little sister likes it, then forget it or whatever.
That's right.
But maybe that's because I'm a musician. I'm a whore, so I want anyone please like us, you know.
Like, the way I really feel is, fuck, I want to play to 8,000 people, or I want to you know, have all those people recognize what I've done. I think it's a natural human feeling.
Right.
But then at the same time, when I'm actually confronted with it, and you see the herd, right, you know, you kind of feel like, fuck, man, it's the herd. Like, I don't want to be part of that. I mean, look at Cobain himself, and what a dick he became just about other people liking him.
Right.
And then he started going on those tirades about, you know, I heard somebody raped a girl and there was a Nirvana song on, and I don't even want people like that to listen to our song, you know, and all this shit. And you're just like, man, what are you going to go out and get rid of everybody that likes you? I mean, what, you know, you can't. It's like,
yeah, there is both sides of that. Like, you know, you play a radio show, and these people are like, they're not the hardcore fans, you know, they're there, like maybe they listen to us, they listen to Bush or so, you know, something completely weird, but and that's cool because there's a lot of people there, and you like that. We play these huge festivals in Europe, which is awesome. They're super into it. It's great. But I know what you mean. Like when you play the little club show with a few hundred people, there's nothing better than that, and you feel like those people really get it more in a way, right? Mm-hmm. So I do see both sides of it, but I don't know. I always tell people, like, out of all the bands I've ever met, every single band I've ever met wants to further themselves, further their music, except maybe Fugazi, right? Ultimately, even if you say, no matter what your rules are, I don't really want these people to like it, or I don't want to play the big show or whatever, everyone wants to further their music, except of course Fugazi.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and that was where we had problems with shit like this. We're looking at the album cover of Invented, and I've been doing this all along, and it really cut into our popularity because there were people who loved our music or would have loved it, but they just couldn't allow themselves to be Dwarves fans because of the tits and ass, because of saying fuck, just because of this general idea that it wasn't PC enough. So it's like, I always struggled with that because I felt like we were writing pop songs, and I was like, how come this isn't getting played on the radio? Come on, I'm listening to this, it sounds like a pop jam, you know, like, why isn't this on the radio? And it's like, after Must Die, which I think was the first record that you performed with on us, a bunch of like scouts at Capitol heard it. And there were so many songs on there that could have been a hit in all these different genres. There was like Salt Lake City, it was like the pop punk hit, but then there was like FEFU, that like a clean version could have been like a modern rock thing, and there was like Massacre that was kind of playing with like white hip hop and whatever. And so they had this big meeting, and then this girl called me who was an old friend of mine who was an A&R person there, and she goes, Blag, they want you to come in and have a meeting. And I'm like, why do you sound so bummed out? And she's like, because I know how it's going to go. You know what I mean? And I was like, fuck, man, no, you should be excited. This is going to be great. And she was like, okay, I'll see you later. And of course, I walk in, and they're like, how old are you? You know, and I was like, about to turn 40. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm 39, whatever it was. And you could just see the deflation in the room. Like, dude, this will never happen.
You should have lied, right? I think it's funny that you say that worked against you, because I didn't feel like that. The first time I ever saw your guys' record was at Zed Records, and it was Blood, Guts, and Pussy, right? And I saw his record, and I was like, what the fuck? This must be the most amazing thing. The same way, like, when I saw Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables, and you just look at the cover and go, this must be the gnarliest band ever, right? And I felt like that. I thought your cover was brilliant. I thought it was great. And I think it's cool that you've kept that theme going throughout the career and stuff. I mean, if anything, I think the reason maybe some people don't get the Dwarves, because I do, and I love the band, I think it's that you guys are so diverse that maybe sometimes people don't know what to latch onto because people aren't that clever, right?
Shit. Yeah, that was the second part of it. Like, the first part of it was like, whoa, you guys are playing punk when nobody really likes punk. Because remember, Blood Guts came out in 1990. And that was a very down period. Nobody was talking about Offspring, Green Day, NoFX being hit bands then, ever.
We couldn't get a show even at the Anti-Club.
Yeah.
Like, oh, punk's not really happening.
Exactly.
Like,
I mean, punk was out, and we made this record, and it seemed so decadent and nasty. It was like they let us be like the token punk band of the grunge era. There was such a PC undercurrent to things, and I think people really needed this as like an antidote. But then, you know, there was a lot of resistance from like sort of the man, you know, radio and all these places, and they wouldn't play it. And so the way I took it was like, okay, I'm gonna get so good at production and songwriting and shit that they just can't deny it. Even if there's nudity, even if there's swearing, whatever there is, it's gonna be so good. And I really put a lot of work into it over the next like 5-6 years, and then I lucked into meeting Eric Valentine, who was like destined to be this huge producer, but he wasn't. But I met him and I sat down next to him. I worked with him for a week, and I just looked at him like, dude, you're like Mozart, like you're the guy. Like, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, within a year he had platinum records with Third Eye Blind and Smash Mouth, and he was not a known producer. He wasn't a producer at all. He was just a guy that had a studio. So I thought, wow, you know, now I can do this. But you're right, then that shit set in, the diversity stuff, where I thought, oh, this makes us more pop, more interesting, we can have a punk song and then a pop song. But you're right, people like punk fans were like, fuck you guys, you're pop now. Pop fans were like, we don't want to be part of this, you guys are a punk band. And it was just like, whoa, man, I got left with this tiny sliver of fans that got it, that were like, wow, this is sort of everything at once, like, this is cool, you know?
Maybe. I think people come around, though, if you stick to what you're doing, even if it's diverse. I don't know for sure if it's worked out that way for you, but
this record now everybody's making a big fuss about and saying, wow, this is like a return to form. I think part of that was it came out on Recess. Do you know those guys?
No, I don't.
San Pedro, it was like there was a band from the 90s called FYP, you might have known, and then now they got a band, Toys That Kill, but Todd is the guy that runs it, and I think he's got a lot of sort of underground punk cred, much deserved. So when he put the record out, people were like, "Oh yeah, we can like this," you know, and it got some of that. But you know, of course, the music industry's dead too. So you know, it's like I made more money back in the day off records that nobody bought than I make now off records that they do, because there was so much more money then. You could get some, you know, you'd catch Brett Gurwitz when he was high and get 50 grand, you know what I mean? It's like now that's going to be much more difficult to do.
More difficult, yeah. That's funny. I know. What do you do? The music industry is dead for sure, and like I think everybody's kind of around scratching their heads. It's like, well, you know, everyone's like, well, just tour more. Well, like, you know, we're not going to go out and tour 300 days a year. That's not necessarily what makes it fun. You want to be creating music. You want to be furthering your band.
It seems like with the Offspring you have a similar thing, but the way it works with you guys is that when you do the creative weird stuff, people just kind of tolerate it because it's not the hit. And then they go, okay, thanks for being funny, Dexter, now where's my hit? You know, and then you continue to deliver that. What pisses me off, and what I always thought was just sour grapes, because I knew Nirvana. We played with Nirvana. I knew these bands. I know Green Day. I know Fat Mike. I know these people. You know, some of them I'm not close friends with. Some of them I am. Some of them whatever. But at the end of the day, these people would blow up really big, and immediately there'd be a bunch of people that go, well, fuck you guys. You know, you suck now. And I just kind of felt like, just try a little harder. Maybe you'll get it. You know what I mean? Like, come on. Why so much hate? I think, like, because you managed to, like, have this early batch of hits. If you would have never had a hit again, people would say, well, that was a real band. That was a great underground band. Right. Then Pretty Fly for a White Guy comes out. I'm like, well, this is a variation on the formula, which is super effective and has all these hooks. And deservedly, it was this huge hit. And immediately, all these people are just like, well, that's not a punk band anymore. Like, that doesn't count anymore now. Right. I'm like, why? Because they did it twice? In Nirvana, it's like the guy killed himself so he wouldn't have to try and make another hit. I mean, give me a fucking break. Like, that's hard to make hits and then make another batch of hits later.
It is hard. I don't know. I like writing songs. It is an art, I guess. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this exactly. But I guess where I'm going is, like, I love the energy of punk rock music, but I felt that the songs were always lacking. It was mostly screaming. There wasn't a lot of melody. There were not a lot of good songs, but there were some bands that had some. I think the Adolescents were great, and D.I. had some great songs. Rick Agnew was a great writer. I think Bad Religion putting out Suffer was sort of a turning point. Where,
that was a huge record.
Where it was melodic, really melodic, for the first time. Maybe the Descendants sort of did it before that a little bit. But.
And Bad Religion liked that melody so much, they're still doing it, which I think is great. I think I've heard that Suffer melody about 50 times now, but okay. It's a good one.
Well, we're doing this tour with Bad Religion and Pennywise, and it's going over great. Like, we're really good. People are into all the bands. They're showing up early from the get-go, and it's cool to see that there still is, interest in this kind of stuff.
And even the Vandals wormed their way in, which I thought was great.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. I gotta love the Vandals, right? But anyway, the Dwarves. We're talking about the Dwarves.
That's right. We're the fucking legends here, man.
That's right.
My impression of, like, when we moved from Illinois to the Bay Area, like, I thought California, this is going to be decadent, wild. The punk scene was so asexual. That whole scene with Rancid and all those bands I liked, but it was such an asexual scene, and people just screamed when there was any hint of sex. Right. And I thought, well, Southern California will be different. What pissed me off was that the metal guys were fun. They liked to party and fuck, and they had such terrible bands and they sucked. Right. And the punk guys, especially in Orange County, it was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, again, it was that same kind of weird, asexual, bizarre shit.
Is that right?
People were they didn't seem to be sucking and fucking and going wild in that way that you would think they would be.
I mean, from where I was coming from, growing up being into punk bands, I just hated the metal stuff. The decadence and all that stuff, it just seemed stupid to me. I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
And now I get it in terms like it's funny and I get it, but then I was really offended, right? So I think
that's what I mean.
Guys like me wanted nothing to do with that. You wanted to write different kinds of songs about your frustrations and getting out your aggression and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was.
And in a sense, it was more like you guys were saying, like, we can't have that stuff. We're frustrated. And then you made a huge career. I mean, Cobain is the guy, right? I'm crying my way to the bank.
Right.
Everybody loves me, and I hate it.
Right.
And it was so, like, and then, I mean, the funniest example to me was, like, Soundgarden, where every girl had that guy's picture up. He was cute. He had his shirt off. He sang like Robert Plant. It was so clearly, like, set up to be this.
Right.
And yet somehow they had this image of, like, always frowning and being bummed and wagging their finger. We're all married and we're all nice guys. And you know what I mean? It was like having your cake and eating it too.
Right.
And the OC punk bands seemed like that too, because they all had rad little girlfriends and cute shit they were doing, and half their mommies were rich and everything was nice for them. And so why? You know what I mean? Like, I never understood that scene. I never could penetrate it.
You want more hedonism. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, coming from a place like Illinois, man, it's not like cute girls are hanging off the trees there. It's not like great drugs are around.
Yeah.
It's not, you know what I mean? Like, hedonism.
But you're saying California, where was it like that? I can't think of any scene that was like that, whether it was Seattle or DC or...
That's what I mean. Why wasn't it? They had all the ingredients. The only scene that managed to do it was metal, and now you see it with club music, right? Because a bunch of punk guys go to a town, you can't give away tickets. a bunch of, and then, you know, but you line up and say we're having a DJ tonight, all the hottest girls will be in town paying $20 to go watch them.
Right.
So it's like the decadent scenes don't seem to coincide with like the cool music. It's always the more bullshit and generic the music is, kind of the more decadent the scene around it.
Right, because the guys follow the girls, so the girls gotta like the music, right?
And girls hate punk. What?
Girls hate the dwarves.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Actually, you know, oddly enough, and I've heard this said a lot, that really turned around. Like all through the 80s and early 90s, it really was just like a sausage fest at a dwarf show. Now it's just the opposite. We get more cute girls than any small-time punk band gets.
Rad.
And I don't know why that is. I mean, I'd like to think it's because I'm so good looking and my penis is so large.
Probably, right.
But, I mean, it has something to do with the fact that, you know, if you're going to be in the punk scene and you're a girl, you want something with some melody, you want something with a beat, you want something, and so much of it is so generic that they go, all right, what the hell, I'll go for the Dwarves, you know? That's the one nice thing that's happened over the last, as the music industry fell apart, girls discovered the Dwarves and started coming to our shows, and now I got girls volunteering to be on the album covers and be like, you know what I mean? Like, it isn't like, oh, come on, who'll do this, please, you know? Where's a stripper who needs a fix, you know?
Right. Well, we all have to take our solace somewhere, right? Every band is not successful in the way they want to be, and they have to say, well, at least we get the girls, or
right.
At least we play to a lot of people, or whatever.
So what is it for the Offspring? What is it that you don't get, and then what is it that you take solace in?
Well, I think we actually sold a lot of records and didn't ever really play like stadiums or whatever. For whatever reason, we've never played shows as big as you would think, based on the number of records that people buy and stuff.
Right, like you guys are selling U2 level records, but you're playing for 2,000 people, 3,000 people usually, instead of for a stadium full of people.
Yeah, it can really depend. Sometimes it might be 2 or 3. Last night was really great in San Diego. It was like 14, which doesn't usually happen.
Yeah, there's 8,000 tonight.
8 tonight, which is really great. So maybe it's turning around or whatever, but I don't know. I think, like you said, like you can't figure out the punk rock thing. I think it doesn't quite fit in to the mold. Even when it's popular, it doesn't quite fit in, so people aren't really sure what to do with it. So
it's because you can't dance to it. I mean, I think that's what really destroyed rock and roll music in the first place. If you go back to like, as soon as it got out of the Dick Clark years, and it was like, okay, let's listen to a Jimmy Page guitar solo for 10 minutes, everybody's on acid.
Right.
Black people, Latinos, they just said, fuck this, but you can't dance to it, we don't want to be part of this. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They just disappeared from rock and roll, really. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, that's why you got disco and shit, because you couldn't dance to a rock song anymore. Right. And now it's completely divorced from it. You know, like a chick that likes to dance just isn't aware of any rock bands.
No.
You know?
Well, because songs aren't important in dance music anymore. It's all about beat. It's actually very clever, right? If you're like, fuck, how am I going to make this work? Like, oh, fuck writing songs, that's hard. How many people have you talked to? So what do you do? And he goes, I write beats. Writing beats, that's not write a beat.
We used to call that a drummer.